dangerous round-the-world adventure. An epic race against 6 other yachts. A crew battling the elements.
The wave came, the wave took me out. I was put down, Mum, don't worry.
Pushing themselves to the limit. But this year, an extra dimension.
Got a plastic bag around our keel.
Gathering data in a race against time to help stop us killing our oceans.
It really tells us the microplastic is everywhere.
So we need to understand it before it is starting to cause harm.
We are in a perfect storm.
The Volvo Ocean Race. Since 1973, this has been the ultimate test for the world's best sailors.
It was the scariest thing I've ever done. At the leaving mark, there was just a wall of boats.
7 identical yachts whose crews travel across 4 oceans from Europe to South Africa and then on to Australia. The circumnavigation will take 8 months and brings them to Asia and New Zealand, as well as parts of the globe seldom visited by humans. By the time they reach Brazil, the United States and return to Europe, they'll have travelled around 45,000 nautical miles and called at 12 ports. But mankind's impact on our planet has no boundaries. So this year, it's not just about conquering the oceans, it's also about protecting them. One boat, named Turn the Tide on Plastic, has been sponsored by organisations including Sky Ocean Rescue, which campaign for cleaner seas.
Few people know the state of our oceans better than the sailors who travel across them. Therefore, UN Environment is very happy to have partnered with the race to help spread awareness about one of the most pressing environmental issues of our time.
It's easy to see plastic when it washes up on beaches. Roughly 8 million tonnes of plastic enters the oceans every year, but most of it is slowly disintegrating into tiny particles known as microplastics, out at sea and out of sight. The crew on Turn the Tide is unusual. It's an even mix of men and women. Most are under 30 and relatively inexperienced. But there's something else that sets this boat apart. It's collecting samples which will provide the most comprehensive data set yet on the microplastic that threatens marine life and ultimately human health. Their skipper is Dee Kafari, a former teacher and the only woman to have sailed solo around the world in both directions. She was worried about the extra challenge on top of the sailing.
At the time when that was proposed to us, we were thinking, oh, this is just a joke. We're just being asked to be distracted from the racing all the time.
Her right-hand woman is Liz Wardley. She's spent most of her life living and working on boats. Her vast experience meant she took on the extra responsibility of maintaining the science equipment.
At the beginning, I didn't really understand the whole thing and all this science lingo going on. I was a little bit, whoa, okay, just take your filters.
Her caution was understandable. There are times when weather conditions means the workload on board is relentless. They operate 4 hours on, 4 hours off, with little time for sleep, never mind extra duties.
Alrighty, so this is our microplastic analyzer, and every 2 days we have to change the filters in it, and we've got 2 different sizes of filters, different densities, and to try and get the tiny pieces and the not so tiny pieces.
At the beginning when we started building it, I thought it was going to be a real hassle. I didn't think it was going to be very reliable. It was a prototype, it had never really been tested before and never been on a racing boat, which moves around quite a lot.
We were a little bit worried about carrying 45 kilos of a science experiment, but the boats have been weight corrected to amend for that.
You're down there, you've got the covers open, you've got your filter out, you've got tiny little pincers to pull this filter out, and then you're aiming these filters in there, and of course your new filters can't make contact with the floor or your hands or anything plastic, and it's like, whoa! And you just go flying around.
But Liz and her crew embraced the mission. They say it gave them a sense of purpose compared to their rival boats. And it wasn't long before the boat encountered the kind of plastic we're all too familiar with.
This is the first little island we've seen. We've all been amazed by just the amount of plastic polystyrene we've seen in the ocean in the last hour.
Pacific Atoll's kind of like the icon of paradise, and here we are floating some plastic bags and stuff. It sucks.
On one side of the boat is paradise and the other side is our human waste that's destroying the ocean.
Soon, plastic even began to interfere with their racing.
Plastically, we got a plastic bag around our keel. It's kind of ironic for us, I guess.
We've got a piece of clear plastic in the engine filter.
Liz was hanging over the side of the boat with the boat hook, and it was actually a plastic bag wrapped around the rudder. So here we are in the middle of the South Atlantic Ocean, miles from anywhere, and it's a plastic bag that caused us a problem.
We were born before the wind.
Thousands of miles away, but united by a passion for sailing and the sea, is the man who will make sense of the data.
Yeah, the bonnie boat was one as we sail into the mystic.
What is it you love about it?
The freedom, you know, we're powered by the wind, it's quiet.
Dr. Tosta Tanua once sailed solo from his home in Sweden all the way to California. He's now a chemical oceanographer based in the German city of Kiel. You really can then appreciate the job that Liz and her colleagues are doing.
Oh, absolutely. And they are pushing it, and when I get that kind of weather condition, I slow down a bit. Down in the Southern Ocean with force 10 winds and 10-meter waves, that's, you know, you don't want to make a mistake.
Danger at sea has existed since man first built boats. But now the threat has reversed. The ocean is at risk from human activity. A largely invisible threat, but a real one. Tosta's colleague Søren Guttekunst collects the filters at the end of each leg of the race and brings them back to Germany, where the two men analyse the samples in the laboratory.
I don't think anybody has ever measured plastics in that area.
A laser detects the microscopic particles which cannot be seen with the naked eye and measures how many were present in each sampling location.
Every time I get these filters and every time I also get the oceanographic data of the system itself, I feel like a small child on Christmas Eve. And for us as a scientist, they are really rare, so it's a great thing for us.
But their enthusiasm is tempered by concern at the findings, which are even worse than they feared.
We found very high concentrations of microplastics around the Mediterranean, and we did find a lot of plastic in places like off South Africa, for instance, where I intuitively wouldn't think that, because that is more influenced by Southern Ocean.
So where in the world has been the biggest area of concern so far?
I think the fact that we found significant amount of particles far away in the Southern Ocean is concerning. It really tells us the microplastic is everywhere.
There's no escape from it.
I think there is. You will be very hard pressed to find a place where you find no microplastic.
A billion people rely on seafood as their primary source of protein. Many more of us eat it regularly, unaware that some of it could be contaminated.
The microplastics issue is much more insidious because we can't actually see the problem. And scientists have done some calculations to show that if you're eating seafood regularly, you may be swallowing several thousand particles of plastic a year. Things like mussels or oysters, they filter water to get their food and they take particles out of them. And then those particles can be absorbed by those organisms or can still be within them when they're harvested by us and end up back on our plates. And we actually don't know the extent of the risk at the moment. But I think we can say with some certainty that if we don't both understand the problem, understand the scientific challenges, there will come a point where there'll be so much plastic in the ocean that we will be facing hazards that could be endangering human life.
The data from Turn the Tide will be much in demand. But gathering it is a hazardous business.
Big waves came, picked me up and slammed me into the deck of water.
Each crew member is aware of the risks, but accidents happen.
Let's start filming! Help me! Help! 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 All I saw was Liz fly across the foredeck with attached to the sheet that was attached to the sail that had just literally whipped from one side of the boat to the other. I was just scared I was going to break my leg. But a couple of people came to my rescue and got me untangled pretty quick.
In the open ocean, no one can predict what will happen, and one sailor will never return home. The Southern Ocean is the most treacherous, the most dangerous, the most exhilarating part of any global voyage.
Walls of ice-cold water cascading down the deck, washing people from their feet. Your hands are frozen, your feet are frozen, down below is wet.
The mattress had a puddle in it about that deep.
Conditions, one wrong move can capsize the boat.
And one of the worst fears of a Southern Ocean is the Chinese jibe. You end up basically with everything on the wrong side and the boat on its side. Anybody down below has to really work hard at getting out on deck. The secret is to get going again without losing any confidence. Otherwise you're just too scared to put any sails back up.
Leg 7 of the Volvo Ocean Race takes the fleet from Auckland, New Zealand, around Cape Horn to Itajaí in Brazil. More time spent in the hostile Southern Ocean. And when something goes wrong and part of the rig breaks, the crew have to find a way of fixing it quickly.
Hold!
Or fall further behind in the race.
That looks cracked in there. I found the problem!
Liz is one of the most experienced members of the crew, not someone the skipper can afford to be without. But another accident puts her temporarily out of action.
Freddie got taken off the helm by a massive wave and crushed my arm into the runner. And we don't really know what I've done to it yet, but it's pretty useless out here at the moment.
The risks the sailors face became tragically real as the yachts approached Cape Horn. Race headquarters sent the fleet a devastating email.
We had about 35 knots of wind, it was freezing, we were expecting more wind, big sea state, and I saw on the subject, man overboard. His first reaction was there's no coming back from this, it's like the guy's lost.
Rival yacht SHK Scallywag was being battered by strong winds and huge waves. Just before dawn, British crewman John Fisher was knocked overboard by a swinging mainsail. Despite a search, he was never found.
It affected us all quite emotionally. We were very close to Scallywag as a team. We'd done all our training together.
Everyone knew him pretty well. He was definitely one of the biggest characters of the race. He was really, really nice. He was one of our big supporters, actually. He was always the first one down on the dock to meet us in and sort of encourage us along, and he'd stop us all in the race village and have a chat, and no, he was a very supportive guy.
It was a painful reminder of the danger they face while racing and at the same time carrying out the research.
Hi Liz, how are you doing?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great there.
The crew and the scientists stay in regular contact thanks to the most up-to-date satellite communications.
How is the sampling going? Are you getting samples?
Yes, getting lots of samples. So basically we're changing the filters every 48 hours. We just have a small problem at the moment, and that we have lots of sargassum seaweed, and it's clogging up our filters a little bit. So
It's an opportunity to provide updates on the results.
It looks like we do find comparable concentration of microplastic even in the South Pacific as we did in the South Indian Ocean going up to Melbourne. So we've seen that we have plastic everywhere so far.
Even in the region of Point Nemo, the remotest place on the planet, nearly 1,700 miles from inhabited land. And yet 26 particles of plastic per cubic metre of seawater were measured. When sailing here, you can be closer to the crew of the International Space Station than anyone on Earth. The highest readings were recorded close to big population centres, including in the Western Mediterranean at the beginning of the race. 307 particles there, and in the South China Sea close to Hong Kong, where they found 349 particles. It's further proof that microplastic has become pervasive, and there's increasing concern that these tiny particles pose a threat to human health. The Portuguese Mercuri Foundation is one of the sponsors of Turn the Tide on Plastic. Its medical advisor is deeply concerned about the effects the chemicals in plastic could have.
It will be catastrophic, not now, but in the third generation. Each time more we have diseases, new diseases from new contaminants. We are having more cancer, more allergic diseases, more infertility. We are less fertile than our grandfathers.
Are you saying that plastic is killing the human race?
Yes, it's killing human race, but slowly. We don't realize how many chemicals we have in the world that could interfere with us. The hormonal system is like a symphony. And it's like when you introduce this, it's like playing Chopin with an hammer. So they disrupt, they interfere with hormones.
You're just scaremongering, aren't you?
The way you use plastic, and this is so convenient for modern life, we are not going to change if you are not scary.
It's because of this concern that the data collected during this race is so important, and all 7 yachts contribute to oceanic research. Drifter buoys will feed data about weather and currents to satellites.
So this is our alien, our drifter buoy. He weighs 20 kilos, and we're about to deploy him into the Southern Ocean. It's water activated, which is why it's wrapped in plastic. So a necessary evil. So we're going to take this plastic off, and then we're ceremoniously going to chuck him into the ocean.
Can I say goodbye to R2D2?
But there's another more basic reason why even this crew cannot avoid using plastic.
One of the most valuable items on board a sailing yacht, believe it or not, is toilet paper and kitchen paper. How do you keep that dry in a yacht that's very damp and humid all the time? As a result, we vacuum pack our paper so that we can ensure we've always got dry toilet roll. This is a single-use plastic that we'd rather not use. But by nature of where we're operating, it's a need be.
The end of the 8th stage of the race brings the yachts to America, along with the next batch of filters, which the scientists are desperate to get their hands on.
That's because there's still so much we just don't know, and until you know the full extent of a problem, it's impossible to deal with it. Scientists still don't know where 99% of the plastic in the ocean actually ends up. Until they do, it's impossible to plot a proper course of action.
The scientist and the sailor meet to discuss the latest data.
Hey Liz,
Hello.
how was the last leg?
Oh, you know, we've had it up and downs.
Cape Horn had the highest numbers with 57 from that leg.
That's really crazy, because like when you're sailing along, you don't see any rubbish.
No.
And it looks so clean.
Each host city stopover gives a chance for the crews to rest, for repairs to be carried out, to reflect on the race so far, and to publicise their mission. That's how they prefer to measure their success, because in pure racing results, Turn the Tide has consistently trailed the leading boats.
Although the actual end result doesn't look that good, the racing that we've done has been pretty good. My guys have done better than everyone thought they would do. And on top of that, we're actually contributing to data and research and analysis of the issue of microplastics whilst communicating on the greater scale of single-use plastics.
I'm proud to be part of it. It gives you a great sense of achievement, and especially when we get the results back. I'm saddened by the results, but at the same time it's because of us that they have them, and that's a great achievement.
This year's event may be ending, but another kind of race is just beginning. And those involved are glad to see that a start is finally being made.
We are able to create some knowledge that might help to mitigate the problem, or at least understand the magnitude of the problem so we can create solutions.
This was not on anybody's agenda and not taken seriously. And now we're reaching the point where, in the same way, smoking a cigarette in a public place isn't a good thing, it's now not so good to be carrying a disposable coffee cup as it was, say, 2 or 3 years ago.
In future races, more yachts are likely to carry the equipment to gather even more data on microplastics. The vast oceans cannot be cleaned like a beach or a riverbank. The only solution: to stop the pollution at source.